Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. You have to start calling this Schwitzing Shabbos. Schwitzing Shabbos.
Oh, should I close that?
No, might as well. Okay. Right. Aaron, I did what you said. I opened the door there and the door here, and we'll see if we get. Yeah, we'll see if we get it cross breeds.
So birds flies then I'm running.
Yes, we have the sharks and birds. We know exactly. How to put that. I was gonna say you gotta keep some of these things more secret.
I know.
But hey, Shabbat Shalom, everybody watching. We're gonna get started with anything this week. I'll just put something. Shalom, everybody. Shalom. And a very happy bar mitzvah anniversary to Philip. How many years of anniversary? Well, it was just last year. I love it. What a treat. And of course, for Shabbat Nachamu, to have you, such a wonderful, comforting presence here to be able to help us later by reading our Haftarah is really quite a wonderful treat. And Rona, to see you both in the flesh is really quite wonderful here. So we're going to get started with our service. We're on page 186, very top of the page. Turn now to page 192, Matov. Turn now to page 194.
We'll do that again.
Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh chol basar mafli ba'asot. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wonders. We'll turn now to page 196. Now rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasafi bina lafrid beyom v'layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokei ha'ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokach haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechid mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'aev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir shina me'inai utnua me'afai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'et chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'tifara. Please be seated. We're now on page 204. We'll begin by reading together in Hebrew at the top of the page and then the English at the bottom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. O Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. We're now on page 206. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shiur שאדם אוכל פירותיהם בעולם הזה, והקרן קיימת לו לעולם הבא, ואלו הן עיבוד אהבהם וגמילות חסדים, והשכמת בית המדרש שחרית וערבית, והכנסת אורחים וביקור כהנים, והכנסת כלה לבית המת ועיון תפילה, והבעת שלום בין אדם לחברו, ותלמוד תורה כנגד כולם. We rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 212 for the opening blessing of the Sukkah. Baruch shehamar ve'ayah Baruch Hu, Baruch Hoseh Bereshit, Baruch Omer ve'Yoseh, Baruch Gozer u'Mekayem, Baruch Merachem al haaretz, Baruch Merachem al habriot, Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov L'Rehav, Baruch Chaylaad V'Kayam HaNetzach, Baruch Hodeu Matzil, Baruch Shemo, Bishvachot u'Bizmirot Megadelcha, Unshabecha Nefayach V'Naskir Shimcha V'Namlicha Malkeinu Eloheinu, Yachid Chei Ha'olamim, Melech Meshubach U'Mufar Deyat Shemo HaGadol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech Mehulal Batishvach. Please be seated. We're on page 214, and we are the second line down in Hebrew. Tol lehodon Adonai, Tol lehodon Adonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon, Tol lehodon Adonai, lehagim baboker chastecha, lehagim baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha b'leilot, ve'emunatcha b'leilot, tov lehodon Adonai. Alehi asur ve'alei nabel, alehi gayon bechinor, Yisimchtani Adonai befoalecha, b'maaseh yadecha haraneim. Maganu maasecha ya, me'odam kumachshevotecha. Maganu maasecha ya, me'odam kumachshevotecha. Maganu maasecha ya, me'odam kumachshevotecha. And on page 215. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Odi Hallelujah, Odi Hallelujah. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Odi Hallelujah, Odi Hallelujah. Selah. We continue silently, Ashrei. Now, on the bottom of page 216. Hallelujah. 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 Psalm 150, page 218. Hallelujah. On page 219. Nishmat kol echai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Continue silently to the bottom of the page. We're now on page 220. Ihilufinu malehe shira kayam ulshonehinu rina kamol gadam vesiftatenu sheva kemarchevei rakia veinenu mehirot kasher vechayareach V'yadeinu prusot kenishrei shamayim V'ragleinu kalot ka'ayalot Ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotinu ve'imoteinu. Continue sounding. We're now on page 222, the second paragraph down. Shochen had ma'um v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv ranenu tzadikim b'Adonai na'yesharim na'bateilam v'fi yesharim titalalu divrei tzadikim titbarachu b'lshon chasidim titromamu b'kerev kedoshim titkadashu kehalot v'bebot amcha me'ed Yisrael v'herina nidbar Shimcha Malkeinu b'chol dor Ador Yababai Yababai Bai 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 Yababai Yababai Bai Bai Yai Bai Bai Yai Bai Bai Yababai Bai 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 Ay Yababai Yababai Yai Bai Bai. We now rise in body or spirit for the concluding blessing of Zuket Zimra on page 223. Yishtabach Shimecha Alad Makinu Ahel HaMelech HaGadol HaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Imotenu Shivshvach Halel V'Zimra Ha'oz U'Memshala HaNetzach Gedula U'Gvura Tila V'Tiferet Kedusha U'Malchut Brachot ve'hodot me'ata ve'ad olam Baruch atah Adonai el melech gadol v'tishmachot el ha'hodot Adonai niflaot abocher b'shirei zimra melech elechei ha'olamim Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah Ve'amad yibrachurtei ve'amlich machutei V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael B'hagala u'bizman kariv v'imeru Amen Yesh mei rabbah mevarach Le'alam le'almei almayam Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramaham v'yitnaseh V'yitadahar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekucha Le'elaham v'yitkol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechamata damir ha'melma v'imeru Amen Barechu et Adonai ha'mevorach Baruch Adonai Hamorach Leolam Vahed. Please be seated. We're now on page 228.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech Shalom, shalom, Continue silently.
now to page 230. This is reading. I'll read together on the top of the page in English and then the Hebrew at the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai, our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. לעולם ועד כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא תחנו נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך ואבינו לשלום בארבע כנפות הארץ ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו כי אל פועל ישועות אתה ובנו בחרת וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך על יחידך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל מאהבה שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני Now on the top of page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווה היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברתם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך ושרתם לאות ידיך והיו תותפות בעיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We're now on page 236. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei bigdeihem letorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf b'til techelet lehaya lachem letzitzit uritem oto וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. Let's read together now on the top of page 239. Emet, there is no place where you are not, even in the wilderness there is your word. Emet, that pen strokes of lightning, white fire, black flame, stir the soul's passion, guide our sacred way, true and enduring is Torah. Your truth for us is certain and established, now and forevermore. Like Moses, Miriam, and all Israel, we sing out and rejoice as we turn to page 240. Adas Israel, Ufedechenu Mecha, Yehuda Israel, Go Aleinu, Adonai Tzvahot Shemo, Kedosh Israel, Baruch Atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. Begin the Amidah together on page 242 and then continue silently. Please go at your own pace. And when you're finished, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agitei natecha. Adonai, open up my lips, and my mouth may declare your praise. I understand. Thank you for the repetition. Okay, So we'll now rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 324 for the repetition of the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotinu ve'imotzeinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim Ve'Koner Hakol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע מוריד אתה מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיים מתים ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לישני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומדם מלך, מלך ממית ומחייב ומצמיח ישועה ונאמרת לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. We're on page 326. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמכתישים אותו בשמרון הכתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זהבי המחר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך הארץ כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו אדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו מלכנו ומושיענו והוא ישפיענו ורחמיו לעיני כל חי אני אדוני אלוהיכם ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. Hallelujah. We're on page 328. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד God לך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד God לך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא יבוש לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Please be seated. We're now on page 329, the very top. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. מקדשי שמי שבת כולם ישמעו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. ישמחו במלכותך Shomrei, 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 Shabbat Bekorei, Oneg Shabbat. Ve'ashvi Ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Femnahat Yavi, Oto Kerata Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat Bekorei, Oneg Shabbat. Zecher Lemaseh
Bereshit Shabbat.
Zecher Lemaseh Bereshit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat. Bekorei, Oneg Shabbat. Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Ritzei, Ritzei, b'Mnuchateinu. Kahadeshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha. Sahabeinu mituvecha, v'samecheinu b'shuatecha, v'tahem libeinu, le'ovdecha be'emet, ve'ha'achileinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ay, 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 B'Ahava Ratzon Shabbat Kodshecha, Vaynuchuva Yisrael Mekadshe Shemecha, Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Let's read together now in the middle of page 330 in English. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai, shotcha levadcha biranahu. Turn now to page 332. We'll begin reading together in English at the bottom of the page and conclude each paragraph with the words in Hebrew, Modim anachnu lach. Grateful and thankful we are to God for all of these gifts. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, Modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, Modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others may live in dignity and freedom, Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulachanai leodot. Prayer for peace, page 334. Sim shalom tova ubracha, ein ma'achesed berachamim aleinu, ve'achol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael ha'amecha, Orcheinu Yotzreinu Kulanu Kecha, Be'or Panecha, Ki Be'or Panecha Natata Lanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Sim Shalom, Tova Ubracha, Chen V'Chesed V'Rachamim V'Rachamim Aleinu, Ve'Hakol Yisrael, Ve'Hakol Yisrael Amecha, Torah Chaim Ve'Ahavat Chesed, Ve'Ahavat Chesed, U'Tzedaka U'Bracha Ve'Rachamim Ve'Chaim Ve'Shalom. Sim Shalom, Tova U'Bracha, Chen V'Chesed V'Rachamim V'Rachamim Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yisrael Amecha, Ve'tov Einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael, V'chol עת ובכל שעה, Yishlomecha. Sim Shalom, Tova Ubracha, Chen V'Chesed V'Rachamim V'Rachamim Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yisrael Amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch et Amo Yisrael B'Shalom. Let's read together on the top of page 337. Prayer is not purely an act. All things pray, and all things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays, every creature and every living thing. In all life there is longing. Creation is itself but a longing, a kind of prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon and the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the wordless outpouring of boundless longing for God. Oseh shalom mimrama, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tekel. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Good Shabbos, everyone. Andrew, you can have a seat. Can you just do me one favor?
Yes.
When you're settled, can you find a Women's Torah commentary and just find the first page for Ve'et Chanan? It's the second parsha in Dvarim, the last book. If you have any trouble with it. Okay. Good Shabbos, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. So this morning, as I was just mentioning, we're reading from Parshat Ve'et Chanan. And it's like the rest of the book of Deuteronomy, is a fascinating story, fascinating book, and is really an insight into Moshe's character, into the state of the people before they enter the land of Israel. And also because of its nature is in essence a retelling of past stories with a certain amount of kind of commentary sprinkled in the midst of it. But at the very beginning of the book in particular, we're really getting a sort of rehashing of a lot of the narrative that we've already passed over, forgive the pun. And I really want to focus actually on the first pasuk this week. So in the Plaid Chumash, you have it, the darker colored one here. Ve'et Chanan begins on page 1188. Thank you, Cantor Lauren. Very good. All right. Ve'et Chanan on the Women's Torah commentary starts on page 1065. 1065 for the Women's Commentary and 1188 for the Plaid Chumash. And it begins with a sort of, as I said, a recollection. Okay, and actually with a somewhat unusual phrase and an unusual choice of words to explain what it is that Moshe is talking about. It says at the beginning of the portion, Ve'et Chanan el Adonai be'et hahu le'mor. Ve'et Chanan, in this case, is usually translated really as pleaded. Okay, Moshe pleaded with God. So what is it that he's pleading for? Answers in the book. What are we seeing? Okay, what is Ve'et Chanan about? What is he remembering? Okay. He's asking basically, he wants to go into Israel. Okay, he's been told already that that's not going to happen, but nonetheless, he asks. Now, we may think this actually sort of straightforward, but if you really think about it, it's quite interesting, right? Moshe, who has the most intimate relationship with God of any human being, and certainly anybody in our tradition since him, is in essence trying to ask God to overturn God's own dictum. It's not a small ask, to say the very least. So I want to bring in a commentary from a collection of commentaries known as the Adas Israel. It's, from what I understand, is really a later generation of the schools of the Tosafot, who are really in the school of Rashi. And they collect a number of teachings, Torah commentary in particular, of the Tosafot, who are, again, the generations that follow Rashi and Rashi's kind of school of thinking. And so it's one of the sort of main commentaries that one generally goes to when beginning to study the portion. And so the Datzkenim point out something, again, very interesting about this choice of Ve'et Hanan. And they also broaden it out a little bit further. So I want to talk a little bit about what they broaden out, and then I want to zoom back in a little bit into the specifics of this word and this choice of word. So as he said, as the rabbis say, right, I pleaded with Adonai. So they explain that the Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue as in the language of Hebrew, knows of 7 different names, each referring to a different category of prayer. 7 different names, each referring to a different category of prayer. So those of you that have been in my Siddur class, my class that I teach on Friday mornings when I'm able, most of the time we actually really think of only 3 kind of modes of prayer. And we really only refer to prayer by one word in Hebrew, more often than not. Very good. Say loud. Tefillah. Tefillah. Excellent. Okay. That happens to be the first choice of the 7. Tefillah, which we translate really probably in modern terms as worship, right? But the fixed kind of prayer that we are accustomed to, right? Our prayer this morning is a version of that. But there are more. Okay. So just as there is tefillah, there is techina. Techina is more often than not translated as supplication. If I were to say the word tachanun to some in the room, right? Tachanun is a part of the prayer service that is not done on Shabbat, which is the reason most of us are not familiar with it, because it is supplication, right? It is essentially petitionary prayer. It's us asking for, in particular, usually forgiveness from God, but also a certain amount of asking and beseeching for things that we ultimately want. Okay, so tachanun, techina are all part of the same kind of mode. There is a third, nefilah, which, again, I found this teaching sort of in the last 24 hours, so I haven't had a chance to go back and look at their citations as to where they're pulling this from. But by MS translation, nafal means to literally to fall down, right? And so the idea is really surrender is probably the intention of this, right? In other words, surrendering oneself in the way that, for example, we do really at the Great Aleinu on the high holidays, in which we are fully prostrated in that kind of way. This one is even more interesting to translate, pigi'ah. Lifgoa in many cases in modern Hebrew, I think means to insult somebody. So it's actually sort of hurtful language. But the root in this case, what the rabbis seem to be suggesting is that it is really about vulnerability, right? It's not the insulting another, it's the feeling of what it means to be sort of attacked or incited in that kind of way. And the rabbis turn it into a more of a positive, which is this idea of sort of being vulnerable, which is a part of all of this. Rina, which we should be more familiar with, which is easier for us, which is joy. And anytime you've been in a Jewish wedding, you will hear the word Rina certainly called out in many instances. Tza'aka, a crying out, right, which is fairly common in the Torah in particular, and Za'aka, which is really of a similar kind of vein, but really it takes on the essence of really shouting, like a sort of guttural kind of thing. So here we learn already from the rabbis, who are teaching us really from Moshe and from the Torah, that there's not just one way to pray, there's not just 2 ways to pray, there's not 3 ways to pray. There's really 7 different concepts of, and the truth is actually, if we explored this further, which we won't this morning, there are far more than them. Okay, so the first thing I think is a beautiful teaching here is to understand that our way into prayer is not monolithic, and it's not meant to be. It's not only one emotion, it is not only one circumstance, it is not only one language, not specifically the language of Hebrew, but language of our articulation of our feelings, right? And ultimately speaking, to understand our form of prayer, to understand, again, trying to, in many ways, try to emulate what it is that Moshe was able to achieve in his relationship with God, right? Our acts of worship, our acts of really prayer in the way that we tend to think of it, again, is very rarely one note. And if you really go through the whole service, and again, those that do take my class will see as we go step by step, and I think also for those that took Alan's class at Tisha B'Av and a few other places as we relate to the holidays, the same is true throughout. Okay, so now we're going to return to our question, really, is that given all these different options, right, all 7 of these, why is it in the end that Moshe decides that he's going to choose the category of Techina to ask this question, right? He's not going to surrender to God. He's not going to scream out in joy for the life that he's lived, right? He's chosen a particular method, one of the 7, which is this idea of supplication, of Techina. So when the Datskenim explain, when Moses had asked God to reveal more of his attributes, especially his method for dealing with sinners in Exodus 33:13, which we'll just pause for a second to remind ourselves, just guessing for those that are Torah familiar. What part of the Torah are we referring to in Exodus 33? What does anybody remember? If we're thinking about a time in which Moshe is asking God specifically to reveal God's attributes for the purposes of understanding how to deal with sinners. Can we think of, if I said that it's something that comes back to us, especially on the high holidays and anytime we take the Torah out on the festivals, right? The 13 attributes of God, this is really the description of the moment in which really the closest moment that Moshe and God have in terms of interaction, right? So in the end, right, when Moses asked God to reveal more of his attributes, especially his methods of dealing with sinners in Exodus 33:13, after answering Moses in part, he concluded with the words, V'chanoti et asher achon. Okay, so if you're not hearing it, it's the same root basically in many ways, right? And he made it clear to Moses that whenever and howsoever God forgives a sinner or reduces the punishment for which that sinner is in line, it must be considered as a gift, a techina. So an interesting way of sort of phrasing what he means by a gift, in other words, is when God decides this is what's going to happen, right? When God decides the punishment for Moshe is that he's not going to enter the land, applying to God a particular kind of beseeching, right, a kind of prayer of any of the other 7 would make no sense in the circumstance, right? To reach out to God and crying out would reject, right? God would reject it immediately. In shouting, even in vulnerability, even in surrender. These aren't going to be the modes by which Moshe is going to be able to try to convince God. So let me finish their thought. It is not something that the recipient has a claim to. So when we use techina, we understand inherently that that form of prayer is that we are praying for something that we know we really don't have any means by which to ask for. And I'll explain a second of an example of what that means. So what is it, right? Moses wanted God to know that though he pleads, he is aware that even if God responds favorably to his plea, that he will never forget that this would be an outright gift rather than something that he had been entitled to. And I'll say it again, that he would never forget that it would be an outright gift rather than something that he had been entitled to. Letting him cross the Jordan would have been, in his explanation, the Datskenim's estimation, an outright gift. And again, when they say gift here, it's really, again, a sort of suggestion that it's something that didn't need to happen, and it's only happening because God has decided that it's something that could potentially happen. And we know in this case that Moses' ask is not received, right? In other words, God says, no matter what, you're not making it over the Jordan and all of that. That's less material to what the Datskenim, I think, are pointing out. What they're suggesting is this idea, which is really hard for us, I think, in moments of prayer. At some point in our life where we pray to God for something that seems impossible or something that we need that is beyond really any right to actually have, but yet we pray, right? We offer that sort of deepest supplication, knowing that we may not deserve it, or the person we're praying for may be beyond anybody's capacity to save or to heal or to do what for, but we do it nonetheless. And I think that, to me, the essence of this, what's really quite important to me, is that the idea in prayer, and in our prayer in particular, is that even when we know we're praying for something that may not even be possible, we don't stop praying, right? And it may seem that that's obvious, but it's not. It's really not, right? In Moshe's case, asking for something that he knew he probably didn't deserve shows us that we all can do the same from time to time, right? That even when we know, for example, that someone is reaching the end of their life, even if we know that, in essence,
there is no change. We don't stop praying. We don't ever stop praying. And we're not disappointed at the end when it doesn't come out our way. We don't scream. We don't cry out. We don't fall on the floor. We know that we did our best. We expressed in our deepest way, what it is that we wish for, what we wish could change. And I think that in the essence of Jewish prayer is the understanding that prayer is not about asking and receiving in the traditional sense. It's not about a give and a take in that kind of way. It's a vehicle in many ways for us to express in every possible way our reaction to the world around us. It's a way for us to still have a sense of hope, even when our rational mind tells us that it's not there. And it reminds us also in the end, again, even when things don't go the way we'd like it to, that it's not about a cruelty. It's not about a callousness on the part of God. It's not that God's not hearing us or responding in the way that we would like. It's a realization, as Moshe has, that even when we ask the question that we know can't be answered, and when we ask for the thing that we know can't be gifted, that we not feel bottled up, that we not feel like we have to soldier on, that we have to act as if it's not affecting us, to act as if we don't wish that it could be different. I don't think that Moshe begins this portion by asking and sort of hoping for some different kind of outcome in reality. I think it's a last way of his expressing just how important it would have been to him and how much he wishes that the circumstances could be different. But clearly, if Moshe was the kind of person who, when he didn't get his way, ran away with the ball, I don't think any of us would be sitting here today. Right? He still has the wisdom from this point on to the end of the book to continue teaching, to continue instructing, in many cases to continue cajoling into change of behavior, right? That there is a certain sense that, by having these 7 different methods of prayer, that we are armed with every means and every mechanism by which to adjust and to understand and to live and to breathe the various aspects of life, both joyful and painful. And I think as we understand Moshe increasingly as a complex character, a complex leader, a complex person, that we need to really actually dive deeply into that complexity and to look at it really as a means by which for each of us to see ourselves in Moshe and to see ourselves in the story of what it means to pursue a greater understanding of our relationship and our relationship to God and our relationship to each other, and even potentially our relationship to ourselves. So I thank you all. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for indulging my somewhat personal emotions around it. But as I said, Moshe is our teacher par excellence and continues to teach us even until 2021 and beyond. So with that, again, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll begin our Torah service together on page 362. Again, page 362, and just a reminder of our page numbers. We're on page 1188 in the darker colored Chumash. We are on page 1065 in the Women's Torah Commentary. And if you're following at home, we're on, Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23. And we will continue to the end of the first Aliyah, which is, it's been cut off for me, I think verse 4 of chapter 2. All right. And for the honor of blessing the Torah, which we'll get to in a minute, we're very happy that Cantor Lauren's wonderful mother, Bonnie, is here with us, and she's going to do the blessing. But again, we're on page 362 first. We'll rise in body or spirit as we don't have an ark anymore, but we will still honor the Torah as well. En kamocha b'Elohim Adonai v'en k'masecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'hador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imlot le'olam va'ed Adonai Oz lamo yiten, Adonai Yevarech et amo b'shalom.
Abba harachamim, etiv habertzoncha, Yetzion, tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki becha levad batachnu, melech elam benisa adon olamim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, udevar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Eloheinu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadol Adonai Tiyodeh Shemo Yachad. Adonai Hagedula, Hagevura, Vehatiferet, Vehanetzach, Vehamod, Ki Chol Bashamayim Va'aretz, Ki Chol Bashamayim Va'aretz. Lecha Adonai HaMamlacha, V'amit Nahaseh Lechol Herosh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'ahar Kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'ahar Kodsho. Okay, please be seated, everyone. And as I said, we're going to begin reading from the beginning of the Parsha. And for the honor of doing the Aliyah this morning, so Manu, you're going to do it actually from your seat. That's what we've been doing lately. And I think you have the page there. Otherwise, we can use the big thing here. Okay.
360.
Oh, hold on a second. Let me call you up. Tamod. Do you know your name? Tziona Bat Sarah. Shlomo Lalia Arishona. Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. V'tchanan el Adonai ba'et hahi lemor. Adoni Adonai ata achilota leharot et avadecha et gedulecha ואת ידך החזקה אשר מיאל בשמיים ובארץ אשר יעשה כמעשיך וכי גבורתך ארבעה נעברם ואראה את הארץ הטובה אשר בעבר הירדן, ההר הטוב הזה והלבנון. ויתעבר אדוני בי למענכם, ולא שמע אלי, ויאמר אדוני אלי רב לך, אל תוסף, דיבר אלי עוד בדבר הזה, עליו ראש הפסגה, ושא עיניך ימה וצפונה, ותימנה ומזרחה, וראה בעיניך, כי לא תעבור את הירדן הזה, וצב את יהושע וחזקהו ואמצהו, כי הוא יעבור לפני העם הזה, והיא ינחיל אותם את הארץ אשר תראה, ונשב בגיא מול בית פאור, ואתה ישראל שמע אל החוקים ואל המשפטים אשר אנוכי מלמד אתכם לעשות, למען תחיו, ובאתם וירשתם את הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם נותן לכם, לא תוסיפו על הדבר אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם, ולא תגרעו ממנו לשמור את מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם, עיניכם הרואות את אשר עשה אדוני בעל פאור, כי כל האיש אשר הלך אחרי בעל פאור, השמידו אדוני אלוהיך מקרבך, ואתם הדבקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayil nasa b'chotenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yashar kochech, buddy. That was great. You got the approval of your cantor daughter. That's always the most impressive thing. I can see where the voice comes from in the family, though. You have a beautiful voice. Oh, thank you for doing that. That's really lovely. Before we lift and dress the Torah, we'll take a moment to offer our Misha Berach, our prayer for healing this morning. Misha Berach Abotenu ve'imotenu Abraham Yitzchak ve'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah u'yivarech et hacholim ha'elu. We're thinking this morning of Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Roberta Kyle, Jeff Baker, David Tasher, Jim Cohn, Monique Ranks, Renee Banks Rathman, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Audrey Lubo, Chaim Leib, Robert Posner, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollock, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chaba, Deirdre Klein, Stephanie Skitt, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Susan Spruce, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devorah, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kasaf, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Leah, and Ahuva Bat Yaakov. If you're thinking of anyone this morning who's in need of healing, we'll start on this side of the room and work towards the back, and then this side of the room, and just raise a hand and make sure we acknowledge it.
Hearing our release, narrowing our release, and filming.
Sophia, Edkeen, Loretta, Falsta, Linda Reiser, Vince, Mary Moore, Jane Cass, Eileen, Sue, Adrian, Rainer, Nikki, and Don Stapleton.
I invite you watching at home if you'd like to share names as well. And we'll hold all of our loved ones and our friends in our hearts as we go back to page 371. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimaleh rachamim alehem lahachalimam v'rapotam l'chazikam v'yishlach lahem mehira refuah. Refuah shlema min hashamayim, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf. Hashta b'alav zman kariv v'nomar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. And we'll now rise in body or spirit as we lift and dress the Torah, page 370. Very bottom. Bezot Torah She'esam Moshe Lifnei Yisrael Api Adonai Yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Okay, please be seated. And for the honor of the Haftarah this morning, and I was very much off on my reasoning why, and I said at the very beginning of the service that it was in celebration of Dr. Ledkowski's bar mitzvah, which it was not, but in fact is actually a yahrzeit in memory of his dear mother, if I remember correctly. And so he's going to chant for us our Haftarah this morning, which is not just any Haftarah. They're all very important, but this is what we refer to as Shabbat Nachamu, the comforting Shabbat that follows not just Tisha B'Av, but really the whole period of time, right? And again, a good plug for Alan's class retroactively. Is to understand that it's a really several weeks of a mentality around preparing for destruction itself, and all of the emotions that go with it. And now we are in a place in which we are looking for comfort. And as I said at the beginning, that part I was correct about, is I can't imagine a person who would be better to read something comforting than the Rofeh of Rofehs, the doctor of doctors. Ledkowski, we're very honored for you to read this morning. If you're following at home, it comes on page 1222. At least I hope we're same parsha. Same haftarah. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 to 26. You'll know for sure if it's the right place if the word is Nachamu at the beginning. Dr. Ledkowski, thank you so much. And the brachot you can find in your prayer.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, הבוחר בתורה ומשה עבדו, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת והצדק. נחמו נחמו עמי יאמר אליכם, דברו עלי ירושלים וקראו אליה, כי היא מלאה צבאה, כי נרצה עוונה, כי היא לקחה מיד אדוני כפליים וכל חטאותיה, כל קורא במדבר פנו דרך אדוני, ישרו בערבה, מסילה לאלוהינו, כל גיא ינשא וכל הר וגבעה ישפלו, והיה יעקב למישור, ברכסים לבקעה, ונגלה כבוד אדוני, ראו כל בשר יחדיו, כי אדוני דיבר, כל אומר קרא, ואמר מה אקרא, כל הבשר חציר, וכל חסדו כציץ השדה, יבש חציר נבל ציץ, כי רוח אדוני נשבה בו, אכן חציר העם, יבש חציר נבל צדק, ודבר אלוהינו יקום לעולם. על הר גבוה עלי לך מבשרת ציון, הרימי בכוח קולך, מבשרת ירושלים, הרימי אל תיראי, אמרי בערי יהודה, הנה אלוהיכם, הנה אדוני אלוהים בחזק יבוא, וזרועו מושלה לו, הנה שכרו איתו, ופועלתו לפניו. כרואה עדרו יראה, בזרוע יקבץ טלאים, ובחיקי יישא, עלות ינהל, ממדע ושלום, מים ושמיים בזרת יקן, וכל בשליש עפר הארץ, ושקע בפלס הרים, וגבעות במאזניים. מי תיקן את רוח אדוני, ושבתו ירביענו, את מי נועץ ויבנהו, וילמדהו באורח משפט, וילמדהו דת, ודרך תבונות יודיענו. הן גויים כמרמיד וכשק מאזניים נחשבו, הן איים כדק איתו, ולבנון אין די באר, וחייתו אין די עולם, וכל הגויים כי עין נגדו, מאפס ותוהו נחשבו לו. ואל מי תדמיון אל, ומה דמותיו כולו, הפסל נשא חרש, וצורף בזהב ירקנו, ותוכוס כסף צורף, המסוכן תרומה, אצלו ירכב יבחר, חרש חכם יבקש לו, להכין פסל לא ימות, הלא תדעו, הלא תשמעו, הלא וגד מראש לכם, הלא הבינותם מוסדות הארץ, היושב על חוג הארץ, ויושביה כחגבים, ענותיך דוק שמיים, וימתחם כאוהל לשבת, הנותן רוזנים לעין, שופטי ארץ כתוהו עשה, אף אל ניטהו, אף בל זרעו, אף כל שורש בארץ גזעם, וגם נשף בהם ויבשו, ושרה כקש תישאם, ולמי תדמיוני, וישווה יאמר קדוש. שאו מרום עיניכם וראו מי ברא אלה, המוציא במספר צבאם, לכולם בשם יקרא, מרוב אונים וימיץ כוח איש, לא נדר ברוך, אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל עמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, נאמן, אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אכול ישוב ריקם, כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו, רחם על ציון, כי בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש, תושיע במהרה בימינו, ברוך אתה אדוני, ושמח ציון בבניה, שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו, באליהו הנביא עבדך, במלכות בית דוד משיחך, במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כיסו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הבנים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת, על הכל אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך, בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Zechut le'imah. Beautifully chanted. So thank you. I'll now ask all of us to rise and body our spirit as we turn first to page 376, a prayer for our country, and then a prayer for the state of Israel, page 377. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry, and take the wretched poor into your home, and when you see the naked, give clothing. Do not ignore your own king. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand of the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace, and may we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. Prayer for the state of Israel, page 377. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatein. Agen aleha be'evrat chastecha, ufros aleha sukat shlomecha. Ushlach orcha ba'amidcha l'rasheha, sareha be'yoatzeh. V'takneim be'etzah tova milfarnecha, v'natata shalom ba'aretz.
V'simchat olam liyoshveha v'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. They'll remain standing as we turn back to page 374 as we conclude the Torah service. Ya'alelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizkav shemo levato, odo al eretz v'shamayim, v'yaharem keren li'amo, tehila lechol hasidav, libnei Yisrael ha'kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al tazovu. Et chayim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomcheha merusha. Deracheha darcheinu v'chol etimoteha shalom ashireinu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Hadesh, Hadesh Yameinu, Hadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Remain standing and face east as we turn to page 586 at the bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach Ladon HaKol Atet Gedula Le'otzer Breshit Shelo Asanu Kegoye Ha'aratzot V'lo Samanu Kemishpechat Adama Shelo Samakenu Kahem V'gor Aleinu Kechol Hamunam V'anachnu Korim Umishtachavim umotim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. We're now on page 591. V'nehemar v'haya Adonai melech al kol haaretz bayom hahu Yeah, Adonai Echad, Ushemo Echad. Now invite those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated. We first remember those who have passed in our community in recent months. Miles Ambrose, Morris Dickstein, Fred Eber, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Lucy Gladstone, Phyllis Katz, Jeanette Kopp, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Madge Judith Parcher, Steve Popkin, Danielle Lisa Rigg, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, Joan Strong, Tangzilius, Virginia Tizer, and Ann Weiss. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week, and we'll begin with Philip's mother, Liba Bat Shrega Feivel, and then we'll remember Felicia Abraham, Elizabeth Lynn Adler, Ludwig Bergman, Cecile Busgang, Rose Schwatzky, E.L. Doctorow, Samuel Fichtelberg, Russ Fearman, Abraham Finkelstein, Ruth Gold, Ralph Goldblatt, Max Goldman, Adele Heyman, Ann Giroux, Seth Kaplan, Richard Katz, Alan Baruch Klotman, Anthony Kiprios, Joan Levine, Meyer Levine, Morenu Harav, Rabbi George B. Lieberman, Catherine Millman, Dr. Martin Protel, Nikki Ritvo, Barry Rosen, Louis Rubin, Carol Silberg, Esther Shapiro Weinberg, Lillian Wolgemuth, and Faye Zaltis. Does anyone else have a name of someone for whom you're saying Kaddish this morning? It's our solidarity with all those remembering their loved ones. We'll rise as our custom on page 598, and we'll join together in the Mourner's Kaddish with the morning.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. V'agalav zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mebarach le'alam le'almei almayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kusha barichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran me'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalom rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ba'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ba'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zikronam libracha. May every one of their memories be for a blessing.
Amen.
Okay, please be seated. Shabbat shalom, everyone. And so before we conclude our service, just a few announcements. First, of course, is to join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. So you have enough time if you want to get home and then to hop on the computer. But also just a reminder that next Shabbat is the first Shabbat of the month, and therefore is our Torah study using the Torah Women's Commentary. And this month will be facilitated by Myra Peskowitz. So as always, a great opportunity to learn with Myra on any subject, but she is really a wonderful teacher of Torah, and using the incredible resource of the Women's Torah Commentary is always a treat. So again, that'll be next Shabbat, 12 o'clock on Zoom. All are welcome to join us. Going back to this week, a few things coming up. Let's see, tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, Ruth's book group will be meeting virtually. And again, if you're interested in joining, you have to contact Ruth directly to get information about how to access the books. And we are hoping that the weather will hold and that we will be able to have our talent show tomorrow at 5 o'clock, located at the field just on the other side of the Christ Episcopal Church on Hampton Street, 114, just as you're coming into Sag Harbor. But we're going to have to watch the weather carefully tomorrow. So if you're interested in coming, or if you're planning on coming, or if you're a part of our talent, please just make sure you're checking emails at some point midday. We'll make a final decision probably around noon. And if it does get canceled, we will definitely bring it back in the future, I promise. Also on Monday, the mitzvah will meet at 11:30. Contact Andrea Fagan. If you're interested here, I'm sure you can ask Marcia. If you're interested in joining up, the Social Justice Committee will have its regular meeting on Zoom at 5 o'clock, and then Myra will be teaching her Musar practice group at 7 o'clock as well. Also a reminder, this coming Thursday, July 29th at 7 o'clock, I will be joined by Dr. Stephen Rosen, one of our wonderful members, and our moderator, Judy Klinghoffer, to talk about religion and science, prophecy and prediction. At the moment, I still don't know exactly what I'm going to say, but it certainly will be an interesting conversation. And Steve always keeps things really it keeps me on my toes, that's for sure. We hope very much the weather will be good next week. We'll be back at Havens Beach for Shabbat by the Bay, service beginning at 5:30, but we have every week a different Tikkun Olam project, different social justice project. This is really for all ages, but mostly, our younger people and their families. So again, Havens Beach, located here in Sag Harbor. If you don't know how to find it, please let the office know, and Eileen will direct you. Also, just a reminder that our August calendar, I think, should be already out or coming out. And then, Alan, remind me for August, because we have a few classes in August. Do you remember the dates off the top of your head?
I think August 18th is class on Elul and Sukkot, as we chart the path from Tisha B'Av to Sukkot. And toward the end of August is Rosh Hashanah. And 10 days of
Yes. That is quite a realization, isn't it? But holidays are exactly. That's the great thing about Shabbat Nachamu, is that it's comforting to everybody but the rabbis and the cantors who are like, oh, no, that's too late, 7 weeks. But we will be ready. Right, Cantor? I think so. Well, she's the old pro. I'm just following her lead. So we're going to conclude our service this morning before we do Kiddush. Let's do 6:32. We haven't done this in a while. I'm not sure if you know this one, but we can follow along. This is what for me is like a Camp Ramah melody, deeply ingrained. Mipiel, Yevorach Kol Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevorach Kol Yisrael. Ein adir k'Adonai ve'in baruch ve'in amram. Ein gedol ha'torah ve'in nasheneha k'Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevorach Kol Yisrael. Mipiel,
Yevarach Kol Yisrael. Ein Hadur Kahadonai Ve'in Bati Keven Amram. Ein Zaka Kahatorah Ve'in Kochaneha Ke'Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevarach Kol Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevarach Kol Yisrael. Ein Tahor Kahadonai Ve'in Yachid Keven Amram. Ein Kabir HaKahatorah. Ein Lamdaneha Ke'Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevarach Kol Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevarach Kol Yisrael. Ein Podeh Kadonai Ve'in Tzadik Keven Amram. Ein Kedosha Kahatorah Ve'in Kol Kamecha Ke'Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevarach Kol Yisrael. Mipiel, Yevarach Kol Yisrael. We'll rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 604 for Kiddush. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et Hashamat La'asot et Hashamat le'dorotam berit olam. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et Hashamat La'asot et Hashamat le'dorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et hashabat. La'asot et hashabat le'dorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafat, Shabbat vayinafat, Shabbat vayinafat. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et hashabat. La'asot et hashabat le'dorotam berit olam. Al ken berach Adonai et yom hashabat vayikadshehu savri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. Chaim, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Yasher koach again to Philip. Beautiful, beautiful reading this morning. Good Shabbos to our streamers.